Hi, everybody. Hi, who's joining us online. My name is Olha Reiter. I'm program manager of America House Lviv. And today we have a lecture of Dr. Alfonso Montero, Knowing Your Why, Values, Purpose, and Goals. Alfonso, I will just tell you, hi, Alfonso.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I was gonna say good morning, but
Yeah,
time
it's good
difference.
morning. Yeah, it's good morning is in California. And this Alfonso, I will just call you Alfonso if you don't mind.
Hmm.
Alfonso is a virtual service pilot participant of Peace Corps Ukraine. We've just started our cooperation a couple of months ago, and we are truly happy that you will work with us, with our audience. And this lecture is part of Peace Corps Ukraine cooperation and America House Lviv. And it is in a framework of virtual service pilot. And this lecture will be focused on leadership, and there is a reason for that because we've just created, and also we are waiting for your applications to apply for our program we just created with Alfonso. The program is person first leadership course for activists called Bully Inside Me. It will start in the late September, and you can apply only until September 10th. There will be 5 lectures in it, and a small group of interested participants. Um, Dr. Alfonso Montero is an educator, consultant, coach, and public speaker. He's worked with many businesses and companies. He's schooled and taught many activists around the world. And we are happy that you are able to share your knowledge with us. But I must say one thing that we always say: America House Review and the U.S. Embassy may not agree with everything that will be said today. You will have time for your answers, also for your questions. And the floor is yours, Alfonso.
Thank you all. I appreciate it. Hello, everyone, and uh, great to meet you, even though I can't see you. And you probably noticed when Ola said that the bully inside me, and the reason why we're announcing it with that title is because we focus so much on the exterior, but not on the interior of what's happening with us, looking at our own limitations that's preventing us from succeeding in what it is that we need to do. We find ourselves struggling, and sometimes the best thing that we do is take the easy route. Therefore, easy think, blame, complain, judge, and criticize, rather than taking ownership of the situation and be self empowered. And so, to grow yourself, you need to know yourself. And knowing yourself, then you can grow others. But you can't do the opposite. You have to start with yourself. And so taking these lectures is going to be a step towards self-reflection, self-awareness, which also it's also actually very difficult because we get to see our limitations and it fights with our ego. And so it's going to require a lot of humbleness also. And leadership is visual, as we know. So leading by example is going to be key, or is key to succeed as a leader. And nothing impacts life more than your values. And that's why this topic is about values, because it provides this moral compass to guide our behaviors, our decisions, our goals, and contribute to the personal and societal well beings. So we may not get to talk about goals, but we will in the next couple of sessions, just because I want to focus so much about first the challenges that we may experience during these lectures, but also because values is just so critical. So I want to spend a lot of time on on values because it sounds so simple, but because it's so simple, we don't apply it in our daily lives. And we're going to see what challenges we may experience in order to grow because your goals are not going to ensure your future, but your growth does ensure your future. So let's start with the first slide. That's the title of the presentation. We could go ahead and continue with the next one. So first of all, I just want to congratulate you for being here, and you will become a stronger person and transition from the I of being successful to the us. So we're going to go from the I to the we to the us as a nation, as a community. And that's going to be one of the topics that we're going to be talking about during our one of the sessions on leadership. But also, this is a great opportunity to lead because leaders are in demand. No matter what field, what expertise you are in, or you want to get into, or what community you're working, anywhere in the world, or even at home, there's a need of leaders. So there's a lot of opportunities out there. And leadership is not about titles, experience. It's about leading by example, which we're going to talk about. All right, next slide. So the new paradigm, which means transition to a new way of thinking, being, doing, acting, and becoming. Because if things are not working, we cannot continue doing the same thing. And sometimes we may think we're changing, but we're going around in circles, but we're not moving forward. And so we need a paradigm shift. So these sessions are going to reveal the leadership skills that are required to lead efficiently and effectively. The sessions are also going to help you become a different person. You will change your beliefs, the way you behave, think, and view the world around you. And also the sessions are going to be a combination of proven processes, new paradigms, and the winning community and leadership mentorship. Next slide. So I ask you to take a minute to write this down. And just because there's a lot of power when you write things down, that you are committed to this session and the following sessions if you are going to be part of it. You commit yourself to give every activity you participate in, that you pledge to be fully present and try your hardest no matter how big or small the task is. And I put for the next 5 weeks, but it's actually for the next 5 lessons or sessions or lectures, however you want to say it. The next slide. Well, I don't want to say too much about me, although I already introduced me, but I just want to say that I just enjoy helping leaders. I worked in the private sector, in the public sector, with the US government, in every continent of the world. And something that I realized is we need a lot of leaders. And so I struggle with what was happening, but also what was going on around me. And so that's why I decided to do my doctorate, to have a better understanding of the challenges that leaders are experiencing. So I want to give you theoretical and practical information based on my experience, but also interviewing leaders from all over the world, from all walks of life, from illiterate farmers to CEOs of Fortune 500 companies. It didn't matter if they had a degree or not, but just how they led. But also the challenges that I saw from leaders. No matter how many years of experience, no matter if they had a degree from Ivy League universities, they had challenges. They struggled. Why? Because 90% of students that graduate from college stop learning. And you may think, that's nonsense. That's impossible. Well, we do stop learning if we keep asking the wrong questions, such as questions that reinforce our beliefs. Or sometimes we think we learn about dialogue, we learn about listening, but it's easier said than done. So a lot of this session is going to talk about how to ask critical questions, how to be critical in dialogues, in listening. And I want you to get this aha moments of this learning opportunities where you have a certain way of seeing things, but you get a different perspective. And that's why I'm going to share with you my evaluated experience. I say my evaluated because I failed miserably. Many times I failed. But rather than giving my mistake to somebody else for free, I decided I learned to not give it away for free, but take ownership of it, learn from it, and therefore become a better person. So that required not an easy thing, but critical thinking. Analyze the situation. What did I do wrong? What could have I done differently? So being held accountable to myself. Next slide. So I was a consultant in Afghanistan, and let me share with you what's happening in this graph. And let's see, where do I start? Well, I'm just kidding. As General Stanley McChrystal of US and NATO force commander said, if I could explain this to you, we would have won the war. And because of that, next slide, please. If we can move to the, yeah. And because of that, I'm not here to give you lessons learned, the top 10 skills to be a leader or any of that. Why? Because the problem is that we tend to be given the right answers. And when we do that, we memorize them and then we copy and paste. But we don't listen, we don't dialogue, we don't look at other perspectives. And so we kind of force it in there and then we fail. But then we blame, complain, and judge and criticize. But we didn't, yes, we do have the skills and the knowledge, but we have gaps. How do you fill those gaps? And also, this is not about lessons learned because leaders consider the individual experience, the history, the culture, and the reality on the ground. And like Ola said, I really loved in the beginning, you may not believe everything that I say because that's going to be my greatest weakness. I'm not there. I'm not living there. I'm not feeling, tasting, touching, smelling. And I'm not in that environment where I could actually learn and know the situation. But I want to share with you some of the trends that I experience from leaders that are successful, but also those that fail. And it had nothing to do with race, religion, gender, any of that. It was just humans because humans are the same no matter where they are. So who's this for? It's for humans who have been schooled, watch social media, TV, video games, and so forth, because we are influenced by that, and sometimes that affects us into the work that we do. And so we could be empowered for lasting change in our society. So again, this is not about lessons learned or copy and paste knowledge, because everybody is in a completely different situation. What I want you guys is to be critical thinkers. I want to give you a toolbox with different tools. I just don't want to give you the hammer, because if I give you the hammer, you may not need the hammer at that moment in that situation. So that way, you know what you have, all the different perspectives, all the potential, all the knowledge, all the skills, all the different things. And you're gonna apply grab one of those things and apply it based on the situation. Rather than just having this 5 tools and try and force it in there. And then you don't succeed, and sometimes we don't end up learning from it because, like I said, we end up going the easy route of blaming. So what can prevent us from changing this world? Next slide, please. Well, a lot of the stuff that you're going to be learning in these lessons are going to be hard to implement. And the paradox is, because it's easy, we take values for granted. As an example, being precedes doing. Also, neutralize resistance, which I'm going to share on the next slide. There's ego. Ego is so critical in order to succeed. But if it's out of control, we don't balance it with humbleness, we may fail. We tend to have a fixed mindset, even when we think we're having a growth mindset. We'll talk about that in a different section. We're attached to one version of our identity. We've been given an identity from people, from institutions, from social media, and so we don't know who we are. We haven't discovered ourselves. And that was me. I struggled with having an identity until I lived in Guatemala and I was with Mayan scholars. and they helped me bury those identities, those social constructs that were given to me, and become the person I was meant to become. Also, because common sense. A lot of us think common sense is common, but it's only common for common people. Common sense, we'll talk about that in one of the sessions, how that's a danger in our society also. And also, I know this already. That is very typical. Well, the question is, if you know this already, how come you're not doing it? You've heard of it, but you're not applying it. So then we don't know. And we have to be willing to apply it. But if we apply it, we may fail, but that's okay. That's how we learn from mistakes, and that's how we transition to the next level. The reason that also can prevent us from learning, that's why a lot of the trainings, workshops, conferences don't work. People are excited, they learn, but then they go back home and they don't apply it. They put it in the toolbox, but never take it out of the toolbox. So there's a power of note taking. So please make sure you're taking notes because information is quickly forgotten. As soon as you leave the session, you're going to be bombarded with thousands of messages a day. Imagine about 10,000 messages a day. And guess what? Most of those messages are going to be negative. So that's going to prevent us from being hopeful, optimistic, and taking action. And roughly 65% of information is forgotten within an hour, and 75 within a week. And you'll probably retain 1 or 2% of the information within a year. That's why note taking is powerful, but also revisiting those notes and learning from it. I'm going to give you a presentation about values for about 30 minutes because I want to do this introduction first of all, and that's not enough. I give sessions 8 hours a day for 3 days on values, and even that's not enough. So it's up to you to continue learning on your own and strengthen those skills. And also, the other thing is not tracking your progress. And we're going to talk about how you can track your progress that you are as you are applying these new values and get rid of old values that may not or no longer be serving us. And we'll talk about that. Also, the challenge you may have is because you have freedom. And freedom is a choice. If you're living with your parents still, because I know the age is between 15 to 35, it's harder. But when you're on your own, there's a paradox. Now you're free. Now what do you do with this freedom? Because with freedom comes responsibility and consequence. How do I define freedom? When you have discipline. And that's really hard. And we'll talk about that when it comes to growth setting. Next slide, please. So I talked about one of the challenges we may experience. Just think about it. 95% of people think they're self-aware, but only 10 to 15% generally are. And it gets worse when it comes to leaders. And so what I'm going to do in these sessions is a lot of self-reflection. Again, rather than focusing on exterior, looking at this leader, that leader, that, focusing on ourselves as leaders. Because it's easier to look at others rather than looking at ourselves. So being conscious of our subconscious knowledge. And we're going to try and see, okay, we're going to get this information. I got it when I was 2 years old. As soon as I was born, it was repeated over and over again. It just became conventional wisdom. And so I stopped questioning it. So it's going to allow us to be critical thinkers and question certain beliefs. And so feedback is critical to uncover one's blind spots, one's bias, and so forth. So this shift is critical to move from the position from the God complex, I know everything, to we'll learn how to increase awareness. Next slide. And so as leaders, you have to be a dreamer, but also you have to be a doer. You also have to be obsessed with solutions. So I want you guys to be obsessed with everything that you're learning here, meaning not to be interested, but you have to be obsessed to want to be part of the sessions. You want to be all in because A lot of us are afraid to be obsessed with things because we see it as a wrong thing, or that we're going to be judged, or we're going to regret not the things that we did. Uh, or, I mean, we're going to regret not the things that we did, but the things that we didn't do. So the third thing is, not to get fixated on a problem, but have hope and have this as a sense of urgency. You want to see whatever situation is happening, there's an urgency and they need you out there. And you can either be on the sidelines or be in the front lines and be out there and make a difference. But also, you're going to have to be patient, because if you're not patient, you may do more harm than good, because you just, like I said, copy and paste, jump to conclusion on whatever is happening, and not be that critical thinker and bring people together, get different perspectives and so forth. And so the next slide is it's a little story of the power of, like I said, there's urgency, but you also want to be patient. And I'll read it. I was hoping to somebody to participate to read it, but I'll just read it. One day, a man was walking along the beach when he noticed the boy picking up and gently throwing the things into the ocean. Approaching the boy, he asked, "Young man, what are you doing?" The boy replied, "Throwing starfish back into the ocean. The surf is up and the tide is going out. If I don't throw him back, they'll die." The man laughed to himself and said, "Do you realize that there are miles of beach and hundreds of starfish? You can't make any difference." After listening politely, the boy bent down, picked up another starfish and threw it to the surf, then smiled to the man and said, "I made a difference to that one starfish." So sometimes we may be overwhelmed with what's going on in our communities, but just taking it one step at a time. There's an urgency, but also just knowing that you make a difference one person at a time. Next slide. So just keep in mind, there's a power of "I don't know." Those are very powerful words. Many times, because we're leaders or because we're leading, we don't want to say those things. And then it prevents us from becoming the person we want to become. So embrace that doubt for better decisions. Such skills matter in an environment where chasing certainty is often unsuccessful. So instead of saying, "I don't know," when you're in a new environment, a new place, or even here, say, "Thank you for sharing this." Or, "I know this already," as I mentioned before. Next slide. So a couple of things to consider to be successful. 80% of your success is going to be just showing up. I encourage all my students, I also teach at university, I always encourage my students to be the smartest in the room. I consider myself the smartest in the room, and this may be my ego talking, but let me elaborate. I consider myself the smartest in the room because I know that I know nothing, and that was Socrates. Because if I show up in the room being the smartest in the room, knowing that I know nothing, then it forces me to listen, to dialogue, to ask questions, rather than jump into conclusion. And like I said, most of the harm is done by people with good intentions. So ask questions, dig into the topic. Give yourself permission to be free, as I mentioned, because freedom is challenging. Create study groups, because it's going to be really important for you guys to get together and work together on these issues that you're working with. Because when you're in an environment where there's a lot of pessimism, a lot of negativity. So environment is really, really critical, being with other leaders that are hopeful, that take things with urgency, and take action, but also patient. And constantly learning, unlearning, and relearning. And the learning part, that's the hard part. And that's what we're going to do, a lot of unlearning. So next slide. So embrace this feeling of uncomfortness. Make discomfort your new comfort. It's your calling to play a bigger game. Nobody's smart or an idiot here. This is not a place for judgments. We don't have time or space for that. Feel free to comfortable to ask any question, to disagree, whatever it is. And like Ola said, yes, don't take everything, but make sure you everything I say, you also question it. And because I'm not there, I'm not in the environment, whatever it is. Um, and take responsibility with your success and your failure, because wisdom is accepting responsibility, and learn to embrace that resistance. The resistance is what's helping you grow. Walk to the fear, grow the life and the career that you want. So go to that fear, uh, that creation of your mind. And the important thing is not to be in denial. And there's uh, is it, it's a French philosopher. I can't remember his name, but he talked about hyperreality. Sometimes we prefer to escape from the reality and not want to take information or new information. And so we prefer to go into this hyper reality world, go into our fake world, social media, and so forth, rather than embracing the reality, which it's ugly, it's dangerous, it's difficult, but recognizing that in order to make a difference, rather than hiding, thinking we're doing something, but we're hiding this hyper reality world. So it's going to require this paradigm shift. Next slide, please. This new paradigm is going to cultivate your life's work. It's going to synthesize a lifetime observation of study, experimentation, and obsession. And I have thousands of hours, and a lot of it has been failure. But that's how I've learned. But I continue learning, I continue growing. And it is important that you have a coach that helps you with your mindset, because guess what? 20% is tactics, and 80% is your paradigm, your mindset, the way you think. And that's why some of my coaches are somebody such as Tim Grover, who was a coach of Michael Jordan. I'm not an athlete, you can probably tell. It's more of the having a winning mindset. Another coach I have is Jesse Itzler, who has a private jet company. Um, Another coach is the former bodyguard of Michael Jackson, who taught him so much on the mindset. And you say, Michael Jackson, what does that have to do with it? Well, just think about, who doesn't know Michael Jackson? His album Thriller is the most selling album in history, or of all time. But you think it was something that he worked on for a few months? No, it was 5 years in the making. And so I continue to learn about the mindset to succeed, not just as an athlete or in a profession, but in just everything in life, to have this wealth, spiritually, mentally, physically, professional, physically, everything. Everything is interconnected. If one is missing, then we struggle. And we struggle, it affects those around us, our loved ones, the people we're working with. And we're going to be talking about teamwork. And so you have to be in your best condition in order to lead and succeed, and also follow, because the best leaders are also followers. All right, next slide. I'm going to skip this slide because I'm hoping that we'll get to know each other in the near future, get to know you guys. The next slide. So I want you to answer these questions. Are you ready to change your world? Are you willing to learn and live good values? Are you willing to value people? And are you willing to help others and add value to them, and invite them to experience the positive impact of good values and good choices? So if you answer yes to any of these questions, then just know that you can change your world. And change is reachable, and don't allow anything to deter you. And I will show you how to do that. Next slide. And we could skip it to the next slide. This is individual thinking time. All right, so values. So values, they guide us into how we, I talked a little bit in the beginning, but they guide us into how we do things, how we want to live. Also, it helps us to know who we are and who we are becoming. And the third thing is that it draws people together despite differences in race, ethnicity, religion, political views. Unfortunately, many people feel devalued instead of valued by others, and it harms them deeply. Also, values helps create stability. So one example is I live here in San Francisco, and just what is it, like 30 minutes from here is Silicon Valley. And you're probably familiar with Silicon Valley, right? Google, Uber, all these big companies. And you may say so prosperous, right? Jobs, education, technology, financial advantages. But also, guess what? There's also a challenge happening in that environment. There's a high suicide rate of students or or of people actually, and it's 4 times the national average. Why is that? A lot of these kids are pressured into being the best of the best, and they don't have an identity, they don't have strong values, or don't have any values, and they're focusing on money, on succeeding, on making it, but they're missing out on all these other things and are not able to work in collaboration, cooperation, and so forth. Next slide. And how come is it that we don't know that the suicide is the fourth leading cause of death among 15 to 29-year-olds in the world? Well, and we can break it down. The reasons for that, it's financial problems, relationship breakups, chronic pain, illness, addiction, conflicts, disasters, violence, abuse, and loss, sense of isolation. Also it's high among vulnerable groups that experience discrimination, such as refugees, displaced populations, migrants, LGBTI persons, prisoners. And so bullying is a huge part of it. And I'm not sure if you guys have been, or any of you have been aware of some global news, but right now, what's happening in South Korea? Teachers are protesting. Why are teachers protesting? Well, they're protesting because they're being bullied by the parents of the students. Now, how are we going to end bullying when parents are bullying? Because at the end of the day, it comes down to not what you tell your kids, but how you behave. And so why does bullying exist? Well, they need control, they want to be the leader of the herd, and this is domino effect. And sometimes the the victim becomes the bully because they learn from what they see and they want the same thing, and they're not being guided. And this is also another reason why anti-bullying programs fail. There's good intentions. Remember I said there's a lot of good intentions that we have, but we tend to fail. One of the things is to inform authorities, and they tell because they can't handle it themselves, right? But then they are the victim. They're not being empowered. And also bullies learn or do more of it from these anti-bullying programs. There's this kind of revenge, and sometimes they encourage us to be bystanders. So we are the police, and we want to seek punishment to those kids. Also, that we want teachers to recognize bullies. But guess what? That also creates bias, because what does a bully look like? Is there such a thing as how a bully looks like? No, like I said, bully could be the parents. It could be a priest. Who knows? Um, so we need more than anti-bullying messages. And as B, one of the um, Ola's co-workers said, yeah, you can just tell somebody to be nice, right? So we have to look into how do you transition from being a victim to victorious? And how can you lead by example? Because we're also bullies within us. What is it that we're doing that's not working? But also, how are we talking to people? How are we working with other people? All of that plays a role. So that's why it's important to focus on the next slide. Knowing what our mission is, our vision, our goals, and our values. And I'll talk, obviously, they're all important, but I'm going to be focusing on the values mainly because of the time, right? Next slide. And having a mission statement is really important. As this quote says, no mission, no decision, and just wandering in the desert. So a purpose statement provides reasons or reason of your existence. It's about why you exist, whereas the mission is about what you do and for whom. Focus on purpose, not reflection. Next slide. Also, when you focus on your vision instead of everything going on around you, you'll sharpen your ability to get what you want and make yourself more resilient against the bleak of thoughts that can crowd your mind when you're stressed out. Because it's really a stressful job. And a lot of the sessions we're gonna learn about how to control our emotions. So stress is not in control of us because when we're stressed out, guess what? That's negative energy that's being spilled over to other people. So no matter how the good intentions that we have, it's not going to work because we have this stress. So how do we control? How do we become aware of those negative emotions and not get rid of them because they're not going away? But how do we manage them to get to the next level of love, enlightenment, and so forth? Well, enlightenment is one of the highest. Um, that's one of the highest levels, but just how to get in a level of succeeding. Next slide. So stay focused on having values. So values are those things that you think are important and willing to work, speak for, how you live your life, shaping how you see the world. It's also measure how you judge yourself and others. And when your goals are aligned with your values, you're more motivated and directed. So here are four values. For me, service is a value, and that's why I'm here, contributing my time to share with you what I've known, what I know, and how failure has helped me become a better person, but also how I continue learning. Every single day, I continue learning because, like I said, I'm bombarded with more negativity out there. So I constantly have to be preparing myself, training myself, becoming stronger to not be slowly influenced by that negativity out there. Because just think about it. How many of you guys have braces or had braces or retainer? Just think of you had a crooked tooth. What happens when you take that out? It goes back to where it used to be, right? So you have to keep putting those retainers every night or every other night, whatever it is. Same thing with your mindset. You're learning this when you go out there. You're gonna be bombarded with more negativity around you because your environment makes you, and you go back to those old habits. They're not serving you. Next slide. So when it comes to values, no matter where or when you were born, no matter how much of it or little talent or intelligence you possess, no matter your bringing, you can learn to embrace and practice good values. So it's your choice. You can transform not the organization you work for, but you can transform people. Next slide. And your values help you because your job you can retire from, but your work you can never retire because your work is you, what you are. And so let me give you an example of values that you may have that are no longer serving you. Next slide. So a question to you is, are your current values keeping you stuck or keeping you to grow and become that person you are meant to become, that leader you are meant to become? One example is Hiro Nada. He was a soldier for the for the during World War II for the and during the war ended in who's the historian here? 1945, right? September 1945 against the Japanese. And what happened is that when the war ended, he didn't know the war ended. He was on his own. And so he was hiding for 29 years after the war ended because he didn't believe the war ended because it was death until until winning the war. And so there were flyers that, US airplanes would throw flyers, trying to hoping that he would get this message, which he did, that the war had ended. But he didn't believe in the propaganda. He thought it was just a trap in order for him to surrender, and then he would be a prisoner. So for 29 years, he sometimes, he was stealing chickens from farmers and doing anything to survive. He did get into a few conflicts, and finally, in 1960 something, just do the math, 29 years later, after 1945, this Japanese, I mean, there's no truth, there's different stories, but they say this one Japanese hiker found them and convinced them that the war was over. So Hiro Onada went back to Japan and he hated it. He wanted to kill himself. He was miserable because the values were conflicting to the desired identity and they were no longer helpful. He saw Japan, a new country. It was different. And he thought everybody was just, he was angry at everyone because those values were not the values that he had. So the point of this is that values he had were no longer serving him. So he had to change the values. And that took years in the making. He moved to Brazil because I don't know if you know, but the largest Japanese population of outside Japan are Lima, Peru, and Sao Paulo, Brazil. He was a farmer there. He lived there for many years, came back to Japan. Obviously, he was famous and so forth, but he struggled throughout his life. And my question to you is finding out what values do you have that no longer serve you. So one of the sessions we're going to talk about is not time management, but focus management in order to not be stressed out, but be in control of your time rather than time in control of you. Because you can't control time, but you can control your focus. And one of the things that people struggle with is they have one of the values they have is being a nice person. And you may say, well, what's wrong? That's a good value. Yes, but you also have to be critical thinker, as I mentioned. Life is a paradox. Things are a paradox. At certain moments, being nice is a good value, but not always. Because when people ask you for things constantly, can you do this? Can you do that? Just whatever. And you don't know how to say no. And you're not focusing on what's your goal is, what your responsibilities are. You're being distracted by all these other things, video games, social media, whatever it is. Not that you can't have any fun, but you don't know how to say no to people. So you're wandering all over the place and you never move forward. You never get to do your priorities, what you're supposed to be doing. And I give a 7-day challenge with the power of saying no. It sounds very simple, but it's very hard. And so this value of being nice, because if I say no, they're going to think bad of me. What are they going to think? And we don't know how to say no to people. And so we're all over the place and we have to change this value, right? Next slide. So how do you keep track of your progress? You ask, does this value help me become the person I want to be? Does this behavior work for or against my desired identity? And keep in mind the following when you meet people. When you go to a new environment, they're thinking this. You're probably thinking this of me. Do you care for me? Can you help me? Can I trust you? So Yes, you may be thinking this of me, but know that wherever you go, they're thinking this of you. And so, what mindset, attitude are you bringing to the table? Next slide. Now, remember, leaders are visual and leaders lead by example. And that's so hard to do, right? That's why it sounds very simple, but it's hard to do. Good values are better lived than spoken. Let me give you this example. This is Enron. Look at they were in the Fortune 500 Fortune 500 companies, best companies to work for. Just look at, most innovative company, America's most admired company, Fortune Platinum, and so forth. They got all these awards. Look at this guy. You want to learn about leadership? Let's learn about him, right? He's running a Fortune 500 company. And this is why I don't focus on leaders, to look at leaders, learn about leaders out there, but to learn about ourselves in order to become great leaders. Well, guess what? I'm not sure if you're familiar with Enron, if it was heard over there, but it was the largest bankruptcy in the world in 2001. It was sometime in September. This article came out in January, and then a few months later, this guy's in jail because thousands of people put all their savings, retirement funds to this company, trusted this individual, and they lost it all. They lost everything. So, what's the point of having respect, integrity, communication, excellence, put it in your website or talk about it, but then you don't apply it in your own life? Next question. So, I hope that you work on this assignment because words that define your life, what is important, what you will sacrifice yourself for. Define who you are, no matter what situation you are in. Your core values do not change. If we identify what is in our core, we can lead a more fulfilling life. Words that define your life, what is important, what would you sacrifice? We want to run our decisions through our values and then through our interests to be predictable. And we want to be predictable. One quick example. Why do you think McDonald's is so successful all over the world? Do you think it's because the best burgers, the best food in the world? Of course not, right? Yet they're successful. Why? Because they're predictable. You know what you're getting. You're going to go there and you don't know what's going to be different about it or whatever it is. You know what you're getting, and people want predictivity. So think about it. Do you show up as a person who's predictable, always with strong values, or sometimes you say good morning, sometimes you don't, sometimes you have a good attitude, sometimes you have a bad attitude, sometimes you're trustworthy with responsibilities, sometimes you're not? Do you want that person on your team? Do you trust that person to work with you? And so forth. So you need to be predictable. And that's why your core values are so critical. And you need to have them on your wall and look at them every single day. Have them in your planner, wherever. Next slide. So, what are your values? Those things that are important, willing to work for, speak for, and how you live your life. Next slide. So, I would like you guys to work on this exercise. Think about things that are fundamentally important to you and related to your profession, personal experience, culture, and faith. Now, and select some of the values and step 2. And there's hundreds of values. So you could go Google search and you'll look at different values. Just there's some as an example. Next slide. Then prioritize your top 5, define those values, and describe evidence. So for example, one of the values is independence, is being able to support myself and my children through my employment. I don't want to depend on other people. Evidence? Well, currently I can't support my kids alone, but that is why I chose to come to school to get a career that will make it possible for me to support my kids. And so do this based on the situation you're in, the work that you're doing in your community, and whatever it is. But make sure that you do know your values, not just know of values, but actually you have them. You've actually analyze it. So please spend 20, 30 minutes of your time. And believe me, they're going to be the best 20, 30 minutes. And do not say I'm busy, because most of us are busy with business, which is one of the sessions that we're going to talk about. How much time do we spend scrolling on our phone? Next thing you know, it's an hour went by or longer. And do you remember what you learned there from scrolling thousands of things? No, right? And so this is worth your time. Really, please put an effort to it. And the next slide, please. Keep in mind, the mass movements don't begin with the masses. They begin with a few people. There's a link here. It's on Instagram. If you can go to it and watch it, and just it's like about a minute to 2 minutes. Just know that it's going to be really, really challenging. And you may start off with a lot of people, but at the end of the day, it's going to be few people that are going to make it, because it's the mindset. Not everybody's going to have the mindset. Like I said, 20% is tactics, but the 80% is your paradigm shift. Having different perspectives, new ways of thinking, being, doing, acting, and becoming. Your identity is your repeated beingness. You have to repeat this every single day. One example is the Kennedys. They have these values for generations and generations to come. What are the values that you have integrated within your home, your environment, and you're going to pass down to generations to come? So you could create this dynasty and are really, really strong no matter what situations you experience. Next slide. I would like you guys also to complete this character strength survey. It's free. It's really interesting. It helps you just learn more about yourself, but also watch this 8-minute video on the science of character, which talks more about the values and having the growth and a fixed mindset. Please take notes and discuss what stood out to you and share in the next session. Next slide. So what happens when we form good values? Well, new relationships are formed, beliefs are discovered, perspectives are shared, discussions give help, questions are asked, critical questions, not biased questions that you just want an answer that reinforces your truth. Answers are found, trust is given, vulnerability is appreciated. People think if you're vulnerable, they may discover your weakness. No, people love vulnerability. I do know it's powerful, as I mentioned. Good habits are formed, self-worth is increased, forgiveness is experienced, attitudes are positive, responsibility is accepted, priorities are identified, broken relationships are restored, servanthood is lived, generosity is served or shown, courage is activated, commitments are made, initiatives is encouraged, integrity is valued, and lives are changed. So are you ready to live by example? Are you willing to invite others so they can join you in this growth journey? And a lot of these different sessions are all interrelated, all interconnected. And we're going to be focusing on a lot of these things more in depth. And like I said, there's going to be challenges based on what I discussed, but also there's going to be excited about the many opportunities. So the next slide is, know that there's 3 types of people. There are those people who wonder what happened, others who watch things happen, which is entertaining, right? Be on the sidelines, blame, complain, judge, criticize, or are you going to be in the front of the stage where things happen? But guess what? When you're in front of the stage where things are happening, that's where you have to have a strong mindset in order to succeed. And so to be successful, need to be that person that makes things happen. But to do that, make sure you know who you are. Do you have your values stoned, ingrained? So when you're out there, you're not being defeated. Nothing stops you. And your good intentions leads to success, not just for you, but for you, yourself, others, your community, your organization, and your home. Because again, everything's interconnected. And I went over 2 minutes. Ola, so you have like 3 minutes or so for questions from the audience, yourself, anyone, or something's not clear. Sorry, I went too quick, I think.
I know that you have more slides left in your presentation, but yes, we are going over time. Still, we have some time for your questions. And thank you, Alfonso, for such a deep talk on such a difficult topic as values. And while we are waiting for our questions, my question would be: how do you discover your values? Because this is very abstract thing to talk through mistakes, I don't know, through therapy, through, and is there a point in your life when you know your values for sure, in your
Yeah,
opinion?
yeah, and that's why I really encourage everyone to take their time and not say I'm busy with busyness because, like I said, that's going to be one of the sessions. That's very typical professionals, and I give those sessions to help, especially, and I give myself because I just had a newborn child, as I mentioned, he's 5 weeks old, so I had to change my whole schedule, and and so definitely do this exercise. It's going to be and watch this video to again reinforce the importance of values, but also look at all those different values. If you're not familiar, if for example, and you look at one of those values, adventure. What do they mean by adventure? Let me Google search it, learn more about it. You know what? That's going to be one of my values. And then prioritize it, which are the most, just five important values, and put them in your wall. Or we're going to talk about having a planner. I'm not sure if everyone has a planner. If not, we're going to talk about the power of having something physical, almost like the Bible or Quran or the Buddhist scripts, whatever belief you have out there, for respect for everyone in the audience. Um, have that ingrained there because it's who you are becoming. It may not be who you are, but it's who you're becoming. But you already picture yourself as that person of love, leadership, creativity, friendship, belonging, wealth. Wealth is not richness. Richness is material richness. How many people do you meet in the world that are rich materially but aren't happy? But how many people do you meet in this world that are grateful and are happy? Right? So wealth is spiritual, physical, mental, all these different things, right? And so definitely do this exercise to know your values, and they change. One example I gave was a soldier, right? You may have values, but they're no longer serving you, such as I'm a nice person, so you always want to be nice, but you never know how to say no to people. Well, you're all over the place. You're doing everything except what you should be doing, which is your goals in order to succeed. And so that's why you have to recognize. One gives you an idea, you know what, this value is no longer serving me. This is what I want to do. This is how I want to be seen. This is who I identify with. And as I mentioned, when I discovered my values was, well, I was with the Buddhist in Thailand. I was practicing as a Buddhist, but also um, different faiths, different all over the world I've been practicing, but also when I was with the Mayan scholars and when they helped me bury those identities that were given to me by somebody else. This is who you are. This is how you should. All those different things are given to us, and it's it's trapping us. We feel like we're trapped. We can't escape. We it's not us. It's not who we want to become. But we don't know how to say no. We don't know who we are. So we let others define us and giving us permission to be free, which I talked about in the beginning. You're right, that paradox. Like we want freedom, yet we don't want it because we're afraid. What are people gonna say? They're gonna judge me because of this value that I want. I want wisdom. I want fun. I want to be criticized because you know what, Ola? You know me as Alfonso with these values, but I want to continue growing, learning, becoming, because I want to make a bigger impact in my community. And to make a bigger impact, I can't be the same person. So I have to strengthen those values or change certain values. And there's going to be people in your environment that are going to prevent you from transitioning.
We don't have questions yet, and I'm sure there are some questions in the course. But I have one more question.
Mhm.
A question from me. You just mentioned about changing all your routine because you're a newborn kid. Uh, what and we live like daily life, it's difficult, it's really difficult to remember and have time and find time to such things as values, mission, vision. We just live and we forget day to day. What other small things you do to support your values every day? Maybe you could give at the end, you could give some tips
Yeah,
to
yeah.
our viewers.
Yeah, so and I'm gonna talk more about that during the focus management training or lesson, which is being in control of your life, your time, rather than being in control of you. Same thing as being in control of technology rather than technology being in control of you. Because people always like, oh, I'm getting social media, this and that. No, social media is good if you're in control of it. AI is good if you're in control of it, but not when it's in control of you. So, but schooling teaches us black, white, true, false, hell, heaven. It's always one or the other, not critical thinkers. Yes, but no, or maybe, or not now, all these different things. So we're going to learn about these things. And so I start off the morning because I said a lot of people wake up with their phone, social media, or news, negative information. So you start off negative. You think it's going to bring you hope, inspiration. Um, it's going to put you in fear and angry and so forth. So start off with gratitude, which we're going to talk about one of the lessons. And it sounds very simple. So please give it the opportunity to listen to this session because it sounds simple. Like, oh, I know gratitude. Well, guess what? Again, because it sounds simple, we don't do it. I start off with gratitude. I start off also with meditation and slash prayer slash right grateful to God, the universe, Mother Earth, whatever it is, something bigger than yourself, and that's how you start off your day really strong. One reminder of who you are, what your values are. Um, you're hopeful, and you know you're not alone. There's something bigger guiding, supporting you to your mission, to your goal. Those people around you that you hang out with, right? Your team that are also positive, optimistic, hopeful, all those different things with strong values, right? Because you don't want to hang out if you're hang out with people with negativity, guess what? Or like alcoholics or drug addicts. Well, it's just a matter of time before you become one, right? So your environment is really, really important. And so just knowing you're not alone, you have a great team support around you. So hopefully, like I said, the audience participants get together, work together, meet constantly because when you go out there, you're going to be bombarded with thousands of messages and most of them are negative. Just think that, I don't know, Ukraine, uh, in Ukraine, if we did a study, but in the US, let's say that in the English language, most of the words are negative than positive. So it makes sense to be negative. And then we're going to talk about being a critical media literacy. Most of the messages are negative. So that's why it's so hard to transition, to change, to transition to something else. And so yeah, the first morning is very powerful. Investing at least 30, 15 minutes of yourself for positive reinforcement, the values, the mindset, like I said, prayer, gratitude, and so forth.
And thank you from me. We have feedback from our listener, Alona. I think that's a great attitude, and also for me it came only after some time. You don't know it from the beginning. You experience a lot of negativity in your life, and then you try to find the roots of it. And sometimes it's social media, sometimes you're overwhelmed at work, or you have too many projects going on. That was a great teaser, Alfonso. I think we will have plenty of applications. Please apply to our course called Bully Inside Me. It's about leadership, it's about growth, it's about values also. The submissions are open until September 10th. And then we will meet every week in closed format, so it will not be streamed online. And only 15 unique participants can take part in this course. Once again, thank you, Alfonso, for starting your day with us.
No, thank you.
we
I really enjoyed it.
appreciate
Yeah,
we appreciate your input, and we wish you a great day. We wish peaceful and calm evening to all of our Ukrainian viewers.
definitely.
Uh,
Yeah,
Bye
thank you.
bye.
Yeah, bye. And don't forget to please watch the videos, do the exercises. Just give yourself 10, 15 minutes. That's it. It's funny how you do a workshop on time management, but people don't go to it because they're busy. So you go to a workshop, well, you're going to continue busy if you don't do it. You're going to continue struggling. So give yourself that time, please. Make sure you work, give it a chance. And it was great. It was a pleasure to be here, and I wish you guys um, a great evening and hope to see you again soon.
Hope to see you again soon. We will leave all of the links in the comments.
And if they have questions too, they can email you, and then we can respond to those questions in the next lecture.
Yeah,
All right. Thanks,
definitely.
Ola. Bye,
Thanks,
everyone.
Alfonso.